Nolan Cassidy stood at the edge of a dream that defied reason. A sprawling 100-acre ranch in the heart of Montana's grasslands, purchased for $1, an absurd sum that had raised every suspicion in his carpenter's mind. The weathered cedar fence stretched like a tired spine under the unrelenting blaze of the late August sun, its posts leaning slightly, as if bowing to the weight of years. In the distance, the main house crouched low against the horizon, its peeling white paint and sagging porch giving it the look of a forgotten chapel, abandoned by its congregation. The land was vast, wild, and eerily quiet, save for the faint whistle of wind through the tall grass. Nolan's boots crunched on the gravel path as he approached, his calloused hands clutching the crisp deed, still warm from the land office's ink. 3 hours later, he pushed open the front door, its rusted hinges groaning like a warning. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and old wood. The foyer was modest, a scuffed oak floor, a crooked coat rack, and a narrow staircase leading to the second floor. He stepped inside, expecting silence, solitude, the emptiness Boone Carter had promised when they'd shaken hands that morning. "Nobody's been in that place for years," Carter had said, his eyes skittering away like a spooked horse. "You'll have it all to yourself." Nolan had believed him, or at least wanted to. 5 years of saving every penny from his carpentry work, every splinter and bruised knuckle, had led to this moment, a chance to own something, to build a life that was his alone. Then came the sound. Soft, deliberate footsteps creaked across the floorboards above, each step careful, as if the person moving was trying to avoid notice. Nolan froze, his hand still gripping the cool brass doorknob, his pulse quickening. The house was supposed to be empty. His mind raced back to Carter's shifty demeanor, the way the man's smile had faltered when pressed about the ranch's history. Something wasn't right that he eased the door shut behind him, the click of the latch sounding too loud in the stillness. His eyes darted to the staircase, its worn steps leading into the shadowed upper floor. Before he could call out, a figure appeared at the top of the stairs, a young woman, no older than 30, her dark hair loose and tangled, framing a pale face. She wore a faded calico dress, its hem frayed from years of wear, but she stood with a quiet dignity that belied her circumstances. Her eyes met his, and Nolan saw not fear but a weary resignation, as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "You must be the new owner," she said, her voice steady, with a faint lilt that suggested she'd grown up somewhere east of the Rockies. "I'm Iris Quaid. I've been taking care of this place." Nolan's grip on the doorknob tightened, his mind scrambling to make sense of her presence. "Taking care of it? For who?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Carter said this place was abandoned." Iris descended the stairs, each step measured, her boots whispering against the wood. "Boone Carter doesn't know everything about this ranch," she said, her tone carrying a hint of defiance. She reached the bottom and moved to the window, pulling back a tattered lace curtain to reveal the endless sea of grassland beyond, shimmering gold in the afternoon light. "I've been here 3 years. This place saved my life when I had nowhere else to go. I've patched the roof, cleaned the well, mended the fences. You could say we've been taking care of each other." Nolan studied her, searching for a lie in her steady gaze, but found only a quiet strength that reminded him of his mother during the lean years after his father's death. Her face was weathered, not by age but by hardship, with faint lines etched around her eyes and mouth. He set his worn leather satchel on the scarred oak table in the center of the room, its surface littered with dust motes that danced in the slanting sunlight. "Why didn't Carter mention you?" he asked, suspicion lacing his words. Iris's lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned back to the window, her fingers lingering on the curtain. "There are things about this land that go deeper than what's written on any deed," she said softly. "Things Carter either doesn't know or doesn't want to." Nolan felt the ground shift beneath his carefully laid plans. He'd spent years dreaming of this ranch, a place to escape the grind of working for others, to build a life free of complications. But now, standing in this dusty room with this unexpected woman, he realized his dollar purchase had bought him far more than land. "Why did Carter sell it so cheap?" he asked, his voice low, sensing the answer would unravel everything. Iris turned to face him, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed her features, like a cloud passing over the moon. "Because," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "he's not the only one who knows I'm here. And the others, they're not coming to make deals." The weight of her words settled over the room like dust. Nolan's jaw tightened, his carpenter's hands itching to do something, anything, to regain control of the moment. "Who's coming for you?" he asked, keeping his tone even despite the growing tension in his chest. Iris's hands clasped tightly in front of her, her knuckles white. "Men who believe I took something that belongs to them," she said. "Something valuable enough that they've been hunting me for 3 years. Did you take it?" Nolan's eyes narrowed, searching her face for the truth. She met his gaze without flinching. "I took something, yes, but it belonged to me long before they ever laid claim to it." Her voice carried a raw edge, the kind that came from old wounds torn open. "My father's gold claim. He died in a mining accident, or so they called it. The Maddox brothers showed up with forged papers, saying he owed them everything. They took our house, our land, everything we had. I took the original deed and the survey maps proving our claim was legitimate. Documents that would destroy their operation if they ever saw the inside of a courthouse." Nolan recognized the look in her eyes, the hollow determination of someone who'd lost everything and kept going anyway. He'd seen it in his own reflection after his wife's death, when grief had nearly broken him. "So you took back what was yours," he said, more a statement than a question. Iris nodded, her lips trembling slightly. "But getting to a courthouse alive is the challenge." The distant thud of hoofbeats interrupted them, a low rumble that grew louder with each passing second. Iris rushed to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer out. Nolan joined her, his shoulder brushing hers as they watched 3 riders approach along the main trail, their figures blurred by heat haze but moving with purpose. "Is that them?" he whispered, his breath stirring the dust on the windowsill. Iris shook her head, her eyes narrowing as she studied the riders. "No, but, that's strange. They're moving too fast for casual travelers, but too slow for urgency. Like they're searching for something." Nolan's stomach tightened. He'd bought this ranch to escape complications, to carve out a simple life on his own terms. But as the riders drew closer, their silhouettes sharpening against the golden grass, he realized his dollar investment had pulled him into a dangerous game. "I should go," Iris said suddenly, stepping back from the window. "I've already brought too much trouble to this place. You don't deserve to get caught up in my problems." "Where would you go?" Nolan asked, surprised by the concern in his own voice. 3 hours ago, he hadn't known she existed. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor, and in that moment, he saw the truth: she had nowhere left to run. The riders were closer now, close enough to make out their weathered hats and the glint of metal at their waists. "How long before the dangerous ones find you here?" he asked. Iris's gaze flicked back to the approaching riders, then to him. "If those men are who I think they are," she said quietly, "they already have." The riders reined in their horses about 50 yards from the house, their movements deliberate, spreading out in a loose semicircle that blocked the main escape routes. Nolan squinted through the window, noting their hard, weathered faces, men who lived by taking what they wanted. Iris's voice was a tight whisper. "That's Wade Harper. He works for the Maddox brothers. If he's here, they've tracked me down." Nolan's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "What exactly did you take from them?" Iris knelt beside a loose floorboard near the stone fireplace, her fingers prying it up with practiced ease. She reached into the hidden space and pulled out a leather pouch and a rolled bundle of papers, yellowed with age but meticulously preserved. "The deed to the richest gold claim in the territory," she said, unrolling a survey map covered in intricate pencil lines and notations. "My father spent 10 years mapping every vein, every pocket of gold in those hills. The Maddox brothers killed him for it, then discovered he'd hidden the real documents." Nolan leaned closer, studying the map's detailed measurements, the careful annotations marking gold deposits in the rugged hills 30 miles north. This wasn't just a claim. It was a treasure map, worth more than the ranch itself. "This could buy half the territory," he said, his voice low with awe, "and enough to make them hunt me across 3 states, Iris added, her tone bitter. A sharp whistle from outside snapped their attention back to the window. Wade Harper had dismounted, his tall frame moving with the confidence of a predator. His spurs jangled with each step as he approached the house, one hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Iris Quaid," he called, his voice cutting through the still air. "We know you're in there. Time to settle this like civilized people." Nolan's pulse raced. 3 years of carpentry had made him strong, steady, but he'd never faced men like these, hardened hunters with no qualms about bloodshed. He glanced at Iris, her face pale but resolute. "There's a back way out," she whispered urgently. "Through the kitchen, down to the creek. You could slip away while they're focused on the front." "What about you?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. She smiled, a sad, fleeting thing. "I'm tired of running. Maybe it's time to face them." Nolan stared at her, recognizing the resignation in her voice. She was ready to sacrifice herself to spare him, a stranger, the consequences of his dollar purchase. But as Harper's boots thudded closer, the sound echoing like a countdown, Nolan made a decision that surprised even himself. "No," he said firmly, stepping toward the door. "This is my property now, and I don't recall inviting anyone onto it." He pushed open the door and stepped onto the porch, the afternoon sun casting his shadow long across the weathered boards. Harper stopped at the base of the steps, his cold blue eyes glinting with amusement. He was a lean man, his face scarred and tanned from years under the sun, his hat tilted back to reveal a mocking smile. "Well, now," he drawled, "looks like the little lady found herself a protector." "This is private property," Nolan said, his voice steady despite the hammering in his chest. "You and your friends need to move along." Harper's smile widened, but it was all teeth, no warmth. "Thing is, friend, we're not here for trouble with you. Just need to have a conversation with Miss Quaid about some property that belongs to our employer." "I don't see any legal papers," Nolan replied, noting how Harper's companions had positioned their horses to cover all angles of approach. The man called Johnny, lean and sharp-eyed, held a rifle across his saddle, ready for quick use. The third rider, younger and twitchy, kept his hand near his revolver. Harper chuckled, a sound like gravel crunching underfoot. "Legal papers. That's funny. See, the way we figure it, Miss Quaid's been squatting here for years, probably going through anything of value left behind. Wouldn't be surprised if she found some items that need returning to their rightful owners." Inside, Nolan heard the faint creak of floorboards, Iris, moving quietly, hopefully hiding the documents. He needed to buy her time. "She's not here," he lied, hoping his voice carried conviction. Harper's smile faded, his eyes narrowing. "That's interesting, because Johnny here swears he saw 2 figures in that window not 5 minutes ago." He gestured to the sharp-eyed rider, who tipped his hat mockingly. "Maybe you saw shadows," Nolan said, his tone calm but firm. "Old houses play tricks with the light." "Maybe," Harper said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Or maybe you're protecting a thief who's cost my employer a fortune. That kind of loyalty makes a man wonder about your own involvement." The threat was clear. Harper was painting Nolan as complicit, giving him an out if he abandoned Iris. Behind him, the house had gone silent, too silent. Either Iris had found a hiding spot, or she was preparing something desperate. Harper pulled out a silver pocket watch, making a show of checking it. "Time's running short," he said, his tone hardening. "My patience wears thin when folks aren't honest with me." Nolan held his ground, sweat beading at the base of his neck. "You think wrong," he said. "I bought this ranch fair and square this morning. First time I've set foot here." Harper exchanged a glance with his men, a silent signal passing between them. Johnny's hand drifted closer to his rifle. "Here's what's going to happen," Harper said, his voice cold and final. "You're going to step aside, and we're going to search this house. When we find what we're looking for, we'll be on our way. Resist, and you'll be buried on your own property before sunset." The front door creaked open behind Nolan, and his heart stopped. Iris stepped onto the porch, her chin high, her dark eyes blazing with defiance. She'd changed into riding clothes, worn trousers, a linen shirt, and a small pack slung over her shoulder. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. This man has nothing to do with our business, Harper. Let's settle this between us. Harper's expression shifted to one of satisfaction, like a wolf spotting a limping deer. There's the sensible approach. Step down here, Miss Quaid, and we can discuss terms. The terms are simple, Iris said, standing close to Nolan's side. You let him go, and I'll come with you willingly. No violence, no threats, just me for his safety. Nolan turned to her, his voice low. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, she said softly, her eyes meeting his. You've already done more than anyone had a right to expect. Harper clapped his hands once, the sound sharp and jarring. See how easy that was? Now, about those documents you took, what documents? Iris cut in, her voice steady. The ones that prove your employer's legitimate claim to my father's mine. Harper's facade of civility cracked. Don't play games with me, girl. We know you have them, and we know they're here. The only question is whether we tear this place apart to find them. Before Iris could respond, the distant thunder of hoofbeats echoed across the valley, coming fast from the eastern trail. Harper spun toward the sound, his hand tightening on his gun. Nolan and Iris exchanged a glance, her face a mix of hope and fear. Friends of yours? Nolan asked. Iris shook her head. I don't have any friends left. The new riders were closer now, 5 figures riding hard, dust billowing behind them like a storm cloud. Johnny shaded his eyes, squinting into the distance. 4, maybe 5, he called to Harper. Can't make out who they are, but they're pushing hard. Harper's jaw tightened. Could be trouble. He turned back to Iris, his patience gone. Change of plans. We're taking you and those documents now, before whoever that is complicates things. I told you, I don't have any documents, Iris said, but her voice wavered. Search the house, Harper ordered his men. Tear it apart if you have to. Nolan stepped forward, blocking the porch steps. You're not going anywhere near my house. Harper's gun cleared its holster in a blur, the cold barrel pressing against Nolan's forehead. Last chance to be smart about this, he growled. Stand aside, or I'll put you down right here. The approaching riders were close enough now to see clearly, 5 men, riding in tight formation, their horses lathered with sweat. The lead rider, a lean man with gray whiskers and a sheriff's badge glinting on his vest, shouted, Wade Harper. Step away from those people. Harper's eyes widened, a flicker of concern crossing his face. Damn, he muttered. Sheriff Bennett. Someone must have sent word ahead, Iris whispered, her voice tight with hope. Harper pressed the gun harder against Nolan's skull. This complicates things, he said, more to himself than anyone else. But it doesn't change what needs to happen. Sheriff Bennett and his deputies fanned out, their weapons drawn but held low. Drop your weapons, Bennett called. Nobody needs to die today. Harper's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his panic. Maybe nobody needs to die, but that depends on whether you're willing to let justice take its course, Sheriff. Justice? Bennett scoffed, his voice rough with disdain. Is that what you call hunting an innocent woman across 3 territories? Harper's grip on the gun tightened. That woman's a thief who's been harboring stolen property. We're here to recover what belongs to the Maddox brothers. The Maddox brothers' business interests, Bennett corrected, his tone dripping with contempt. I've seen enough of their justice to know what it looks like. The standoff stretched taut, every man waiting for the spark that would ignite the powder keg. Nolan could feel the cold metal against his skin, the sweat trickling down his back. Behind him, Iris stood rigid, her breathing shallow. Stop this, she said suddenly, stepping forward. You want the documents? They're under the loose floorboard by the fireplace, wrapped in oiled cloth. Nolan's heart sank. She was giving up her only leverage to save him. Harper's eyes gleamed with triumph, but he didn't lower his gun. "Johnny, get in there and find them. Be careful, she's tricky." Johnny dismounted, but Bennett's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't do that, Johnny. I've got a warrant for Wade Harper's arrest, murder, robbery, conspiracy. Anyone who helps him is an accessory." Johnny froze, his eyes darting to Harper. "You didn't say nothing about murder charges, Wade." "Shut up and get those papers," Harper snarled, but his voice cracked with panic. Bennett pressed his advantage. "The murder of Thomas Quaid, Iris's father. We've got a witness, Pete Harden, who saw you and the Maddox brothers rig that mine cave-in. Says you knew exactly when Thomas would be down there." Iris gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Someone saw what happened to my father." "Old Pete Harden," Bennett confirmed. "He was working a claim upstream when he saw Harper and two others tampering with the support beams. Combined with those documents, it's enough to hang all three of you." Harper's hand trembled, the gun barrel wavering against Nolan's forehead. "That drunk's testimony won't hold up," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not," Bennett said, stepping closer. "But those documents will." "Put the gun down, Harper." Johnny backed away from the porch, hands raised. "Sorry, Wade, I didn't sign up for a hanging offense." The third rider spurred his horse and bolted for the tree lean, abandoning his companions. Harper was alone now, his breathing rapid, his eyes darting between Bennett and his deputies. "This isn't over," he whispered. "The Maddox brothers will never stop hunting her." "Maybe," Bennett said, his voice calm but firm. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Today's problem is you." Harper's desperation boiled over. With a snarl, he shoved Nolan aside and swung his gun toward Bennett. Nolan dove off the porch, hitting the ground hard as shots rang out. Bennett's deputies fired in unison, and Harper crumpled, his gun spinning uselessly into the dust. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant whinny of a horse. "Everyone all right?" Bennett called, his weapon still trained on Harper's body. Nolan scrambled to his feet, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Iris rushed to his side, her face pale but unharmed. "I'm fine," she said, then looked at Harper's body. "Is he dead?" a deputy confirmed after checking for a pulse. "Caught him square in the chest." Bennett holstered his weapon and turned to Iris. "Miss Quaid, I'm sorry it took so long to get justice for your father. If you're willing to testify, we can put the Maddox brothers away for good." Iris nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I've been waiting 3 years for someone to listen. The documents are in the house, everything my father recorded about the mine, proving the Maddox brothers forged papers." 2 hours later, after statements were taken and the documents secured, Bennett and his men rode off with Harper's body, promising to return within the week to escort Iris to the territorial courthouse. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. Nolan and Iris stood on the porch, the air cool now, the tension of the day settling into a quiet ache. "So," Nolan said, breaking the silence, "I suppose you'll be leaving once this is settled." Iris turned to him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Where would I go? I've been taking care of this place for 3 years. Seems a waste to abandon it now." "It's my ranch," he said, though his tone held no challenge, only curiosity. "True," she agreed, her eyes bright with something like hope. "But you bought it for $1, and it came with someone who knows every inch of it. Besides," she gestured to the rolling grasslands, now glowing under the twilight, "this place is big enough for 2 people who don't mind working hard." Nolan thought of the lonely years he'd spent saving for this dream, the nights he'd imagined building a life alone. But standing here with Iris, watching the stars emerge over their shared horizon, he realized some dreams were better built together. "Partners?" he asked, extending his hand. "Partners," she said, shaking it firmly, her grip strong and sure. As the first stars twinkled above, they turned and walked back into the house, ready to face whatever challenges the ranch, and their unlikely partnership, would bring.